Hello class. Today we're going to talk about our Unit 1, the living world. This is our first section of notes, Introduction to Systems. We're going to start hitting on some components of ecosystems, or even more basically just really what a system is in this section of notes. Today, when we're taking notes, keep in mind you're going to see these icons at the bottom. You'll see draw it, label it, and any other commands that will kind of tell you if a picture or diagram is something that's really critical. In this case, we'll start there. So make sure this picture is in your notes. Sketch it out. Systems basics, you have three terms here that are really important to understand really what a system is. And basically, a system is this general term for something made of interconnected parts working together to perform a function. So there's three specific components there. Parts, they work together, make a function. In general, we talk about this big idea and this approach of thinking when we talk about the environment itself. And it kind of stems off this Gaia hypothesis, the idea that the Earth really could be considered one living organism or system because of all the complex components and all the ways that they interact together in the environment as creating this one big function, which is the Earth itself. The goal of all systems here is to maintain equilibrium. These are constant inputs and outputs that maintain homeostasis. Remember, balance is the goal. We want systems to balance out. We don't want to go too far in one direction or another. That's usually bad news for any system that we have. So the five major components of systems in our draw it here would be our inputs, boundaries, so inputs, anything that comes in. This could be energy or matter. It says material here, but we'll get to that in a second. The boundary would be what we define as the edge of the system. I like that this is a dashed line to show sometimes there really is no true edge to the system itself. Storages, anytime energy or matter is trapped in a location for a set amount of time would be a storage. Flow, any arrow on here is considered a flow or transformation of energy or matter. And then finally we have an output. Output could be energy or matter as well. How does this stuff exit our system? So we have those as our major system components. Systems are kind of governed by specific laws, and those components, the input, output, storage, flow, boundary, those components can be made of two things. They can be made up of matter, which is our physical stuff that takes up space, basically is our matter definition, and energy. They can be anything that has the ability to do work or transfer heat. That would be our energy definition. So most commonly in environmental systems would be sunlight as an example here. But there are laws that govern these components. So one is the law of conservation of matter, talking about that matter can only be created or destroyed. We talked about this in, I'm sure, your chemistry classes that you've all had, the idea that this is a balanced chemical equation. You can see the picture and also the equation below. And just noting that the inputs are the outputs. Now they can be rearranged, the matter can be rearranged certainly, but ultimately things just don't disappear or come out of thin air. Energy is governed by two specific laws of thermodynamics that relate most applicably to this class, which would be the first and second law of thermodynamics. The first law stating energy cannot be created or destroyed in a system, and the second law stating that entropy, which is this fancy word for disorder or kind of randomness or chaotic organization of energy or matter. This disorder is going to continue to increase as we have energy moving through the system. So over time, we have lower quality, less usable energy in our systems. And that's just a general kind of tenet for systems that's going to come up quite a bit in our class. Okay, so energy not being created or destroyed, nothing comes out of thin air, matter or energy, and then ultimately disordered energy with every transformation. So there are two major types of systems that we see. The most common would be an open system. This is a system in which both matter and energy are exchanged across the boundary of the system. So typically matter and energy move into a system, they transfer around, they are storages and flows, and then they also are able to leave the system. So any environmental system or ecosystem like a rainforest or any other example on the Earth is generally, they're almost always open systems. Closed system is a concept in which Energy is exchanged across the boundary, but matter isn't. This is very rare, man-made. We can do things like this biosphere 2 is just like a massive greenhouse that had different little ecosystems within it. All the matter was trapped inside, so like you could no new plant or animal matter could be introduced, nutrients, that kind of thing. Everything had to cycle within and was trapped inside. Now, energy, we can get new sunlight in, heat can escape, so energy can come in and out. Matter could not. Natural examples in ecosystems really aren't any. The closest example would be maybe like a deep cave systems, although there are details that would violate that. Same thing with the whole Earth. We could say the Earth is all a closed system, but really there's still new matter that comes in, like something like space debris or a meteor, or even sending astronauts out into outer space is a violation because we're made of matter and we leave the system itself. Within systems, we have feedback. Feedback is really a way to describe the relationships within these systems and how that one component relates to the other. So we have positive and negative feedback. Positive feedback results in a further increase or decrease in the end result. So since these are cycles, when we talk about them cycling, we end up seeing that like some can be described as a vicious circle. So a positive feedback is a vicious circle. Positive, please don't associate with it being a good consequence. Positive feedback simply means that the change is occurring in the same direction. So here we start with like an increase in temperature, and we could say that's a starting point. We have permafrost thawing. That releases carbon dioxide and methane, which is a powerful greenhouse gas into the atmosphere, which then traps more heat and then causes the temp to go up again. Right? And then every single time we go around the wheel, permafrost thawing, more methane, more trapping heat, temp goes up, so it gets hotter. Now we get more melting, more. So we get this positive feedback vicious circle. There's no way out in this particular example, which makes it positive feedback. Remember, again, this is not a good thing. We don't want this. There's no balance or equilibrium there. Feedback in systems, we're going to look at negative feedback. So a negative feedback loop is a little different because we do see a change counteracted at some point along the way. So our initial change here would be temperature, climate warming. So we get an increase in warming, right? Remember last time that continued to go up and up. So in this case, when it's warmer, we get more cloud cover because water is evaporating at a faster rate. We can then, if we have more cloud cover, we start to see this turn around. Well, now there's going to be more clouds, so we're going to get less sunlight in, so it's going to decrease the amount of solar radiation that heats the Earth, and then that's actually going to allow for a little bit of cooling, so this kind of turns the temperature dial down just a little bit. This would be an example of self-regulation where we go one way and we go back the other way. This helps to maintain balance and gives us this kind of steady state identity here where the main amount of the system's change remains pretty constant. Okay, so in this example, we have pretty classic negative feedback. We'll want to draw those loops too. System processes. In a system, we have two basic processes that must occur, and these are really pretty critical, and that's why they're bold and underlined. Energy flows through, matter cycles around. We got to know that, understand that matter is going to cycle within a system, and it can change forms. A lot of times we get transformations and transfers of energy and matter, which is kind of the next two big terms. So when we use those terms, we're talking about transfer as a change in location of energy or matter. Our example here, water rushing down a hill. So we could have this on our water cycle diagram. We could have this water in the stream, and it's uphill, and then it flows downhill, and then all along the way, that's just simply a transfer. Okay, it was water in one place, it's water in the other place, it just moved. Transformation usually involves a change of state. Here we're talking about solid, liquid, or gas. So here's a good example, right? Evaporation. We have liquid water into gaseous water vapor. It gets up in the atmosphere. It is also changing location. So there's an example of a transfer and a transformation, changing location here. So water evaporating into water vapor is a good example of that. Energy flowing through a system. So like this is all matter cycling, energy flowing through. Look at solar energy coming into producers, heat being lost. Typically, these are the two ways that we're going to look at energy as it moves through a system in these forms, as solar energy and heat loss. That's going to be the main main two ways we look at energy moving through systems. Our systems approach to a tree here, what I wanted to do is kind of just show you how to think with a systems frame of mind. So if we have this tree, really what we'll do is we'll look at it not so much as a tree, but just as an isolated system here. The boundary of the tree is what I'm drawing in right now, and these are the major components we're going to have. The boundary of the tree would be the roots, leaves, stems. We don't have roots here, but just the physical edge of all the tree, the leaves, roots, stems, all that stuff. So that's going to be our edge when we look at a tree as a system in itself. The next thing we'll look at is inputs. What are some inputs here? All right, input. Well, one thing that's an input is sunlight. We know that plants need sunlight, so sunlight comes into this tree, and that light is a source of energy. So this is energy for the tree. As the light is utilized in photosynthesis, trees are also going to have an output, and an output of there for energy, in this case, is heat. All right, so we have heat loss. We talked about that again, light and heat. Heat exiting the tree as an output. Storages, where does this energy get stored? Well, we have chemical conversions in photosynthesis, and within the tree, we have things like glucose being made. So now we're going to start going to talk about some of the matter itself here. So storages, one big storage is a glucose that's formed in photosynthesis. How does that happen? Well, we have more inputs that aren't just sunlight. So one of the inputs that we have that's also going to occur is our carbon dioxide, right? So we have CO2 coming in, and that helps to form the glucose molecules in photosynthesis. As a result of CO2 going in, we also have other outputs. One is going to be our oxygen that's going to leave. So we can have oxygen coming back out. And these are, again, matter, inputs and outputs. Within the tree, you have flows. So what happens within the tree would be like a movement, and another input we got to add first would be water. All right. So going back to blue, don't forget we have water. We try to get close to the roots here. So you got H2O's got to come in. And then within the tree, we're going to have the water and other nutrients transport. So the H2O moving can easily be considered a flow here, right? And we have an input. So we have carbon dioxide and water having to go in to make this glucose molecule. We have oxygen and glucose then as outputs. The glucose could be an output too. If this is like a fruit-bearing tree, that's an easy example, right? That can be out and consumed by an animal for glucose as well. So just addressing all of these 5 components and thinking about a tree as a system is a way to kind of help us determine what's happening within here, right? This production, what's being made or stored, and what's coming in and out in order to make those products.